Welcome to Nature's Workforce. This is an exciting opportunity for us to share some work that's been done in partnership with WWF, National Trust, RSPB through the Save Our Wild Isles, coming up with a brilliant toolkit, and also with one of our members, the FT, and how they're using it. So we'll just flick quickly through some slides just to tell you a little bit about how we're working today. So this is just our housekeeping, so it's great if you can have your camera on, and any messages, contact Vaishnavi. Next slide, we will look at just briefly our purpose as Business Declares is to inspire, encourage, accelerate actions within business to address climate, ecological and social emergency. And ecological, the nature emergency, has always been high on our priority, which is why we're excited to be doing this. So we offer transformational support. We get our businesses to support each other. We introduce new thinking, talk about things like degrowth, but particularly we also amplify other campaigns, which is what we're doing here. And we wanted to just, before we get stuck into it, mention Restore Nature Now on the next slide. This is also something that I know is close to the heart of Ellen and Kim, who are on the call from National Trust and RSPB, and I'm sure the WWF, because it's going to be a huge march. I'm looking for many people to join us. And Ben, who's on the call here, is leading a kind of phalanx of businesses in the centre. We have a space in the centre of the crowd. So really looking forward to seeing if you can join us on Saturday, the 22nd of June. In Parliament, and it's going to be even more exciting with an election coming up, I'm sure. So going on to the next slide, here we are. This is our running order for today, and we'd like first to hear from the Nature's Workforce team. There's also a very short video from Deborah Meaden, and then we'll turn to ALISON. So Ellen and Kim will talk us through, and that will be our first thing, and then we'll get to some questions at the end and how to get involved a bit further. So with no more ado, perhaps we should hear from you, Ellen. Yeah.
Thank you, Fiona. And yeah, before we start, I just wanted to say on behalf of the National Trust and RSPB and WWF, thanks so much to Business Declares for hosting us and having us come to speak to you all. We're so excited to be here and talk to you. And Business Declares have been amazing already in supporting what we've been doing through this and also the wider campaign that we've been running as a partnership. So yeah, massive thank you to Fiona and the team. And thank you to all of you for coming along to hear about Nature's Workforce. It's been so exciting to kind of see the initial engagement and get some early feedback about what we're doing. So really welcome more conversation, and hopefully there'll be time at the end for questions. So yeah, just please ask anything. There's a chat box, I think, which is where we're wanting questions. So I'm going to speak a little bit about Nature's Workforce and the kind of broader campaign. And then I'm going to hand over to Kim, who's been really instrumental in developing the kind of the business advocacy side of this and can talk in a little bit more detail about the kit itself and how it works. So yeah, this slide's just giving you a little overview of what to expect from my and Kim's talk. Next slide, please, Vaishnavi. Thank you. So yeah, just a bit of scene setting really, because not everybody will be aware of why the National Trust, the RSPB and WWF are actually working together. So we've been working in partnership, which is a first for us, for the last year and a half on Save Our Wild Isles, which was a huge campaign, a national campaign that we launched. Our catalyst for it was the latest David Attenborough show, which I hope lots of you got to see. It was a very beautiful show all about UK nature. So the first time that he's really focused on that rather than looking overseas. We wanted to use David Attenborough's powerful voice and the TV series really as a catalyst for a conversation. So by raising awareness of the beauty of UK nature, which of course lots of us are already aware of, but many don't always get to experience, then using that almost as a starting point to then raise awareness of the challenges and the threats that are also faced by UK nature and starting to drive action to change that. So we have 12 million viewers for the TV series. The three organisations were involved in a sixth episode, which was all about then showing what action was actually being started to be taken by lots of different communities and audiences. And then we launched our year-long campaign, which is what we've all been working on. So the campaign is actually aimed at lots of different audiences. Business is one of those, and I'll speak about that in a little bit more detail in a minute. But we were also seeking to engage the public, of course, through the TV series, and policymakers and politicians. So we have a saying within the campaign team, which is trying to break the Shirker's triangle. So I don't know if this is something anyone's come across before, but the Shirker's triangle, if you imagine your triangle, and you've got politicians, you've got businesses, and you've got the general public. Everyone's sort of saying, "Oh, I can't do anything because the other system actor isn't doing their bit." So our whole kind of theory of change for the campaign was to break that down and really show each of those different system actors what action they could be taking today. Next slide, please, Vaish. So we're obviously here speaking to a business community, so I'm going to focus a little bit more on that today. But if you visit the Save Our Wild Isles website, you can also see the broader campaign in more detail. But around the business engagement side of things, we really started that off with some storytelling and content creation, which we were hoping and has achieved a really great sort of starting point for these conversations. So you can see here 4 screenshots. These are of 4 different films that we produced. And these films are available for free for anybody in any business to share. And what we really have seen happen is by using these pieces of content, which all focus on different elements of the system and how they can affect UK biodiversity, we've really been able to catalyse a lot of different conversations over hundreds and thousands of businesses. So we think we've so far reached about 45,000 different employees with the screenings programme. So that's been a whole range of different corporate businesses and smaller businesses all sharing these films and then using those as a starting point to talk about what they can do next within their business. We've seen that really gain momentum, but we know it's really urgent and we've got not very long to really make this happen. So hence wanting to move on to the next stage of what we're doing, which is Nature's Workforce. Next slide, please, Vaish. Thank you. So yes, in the conversations we've been having with businesses and employees, Kim will tell you the biggest question we get is, okay, so if these are the problems, what can I do on a personal level? And not everybody necessarily feels equipped to do that. So what we've seen, and I think what you guys might resonate with, is there's lots of training and kind of engagement, maybe aimed at the higher level kind of sustainability roles within the business, but less so if you're in a different role, perhaps a more junior role or something that's not so directly connected to sustainability. So this became something we were aware of through the early stage of the campaign, a real gap that we felt that we would be able to help address. So you can see on the right-hand side here, there's some statistics there, which just demonstrate a little bit more about that need. So 62% of the people that we surveyed said that their employers should be doing more to tackle biodiversity and nature issues, but 42% of them don't feel confident to start a conversation on the subject, because if it's not your technical area, if you don't feel kind of up on the terminology, the right phrasing, the questions to ask, essentially, you really might not know where to start. So that's what we are hoping Nature's Workforce is going to help address. I think the thing that's really exciting about it, and the reason Fiona has invited ALISON here today to talk about her engagement with it, is we actually created this in collaboration. So we brought on a whole raft of different volunteers from different businesses, so housing, banking, food, all sorts, and basically all these different roles at different levels of business. And we worked with them to craft and create Nature's Workforce to make sure that it actually was applicable and accessible, because that's the key thing really for us, is that this is not for your experts. Obviously, we'd be delighted if experts want to take this forward and use it with their engagement, but actually this is for anybody in any role who wants to start to take action and begin conversations within their workplace. Next slide, please, Vaish. So actually, this is me handing over to Kim now. So Kim's going to speak about the bigger picture and then go into more of the detail of what Nature's Workforce actually is. So over to Kim.
Yeah, hi everyone, thanks Ellen. Really sorry if it's a little bit noisy. The meeting room I had booked had a broken desk, so I'm in the corridor, I'm afraid. So hopefully you can hear me okay. So as we're all here and all know of Business Declares, I'm sure we're all more than aware of the impact that businesses have on nature. But just to kind of flag the main points of that, businesses really are fundamental to the recovery and protection of nature. And in fact, our food system is responsible for a huge amount of destruction alone before getting into any of the other sectors. So I think what we wanted to recognise was that if we want to address the nature crisis in a really meaningful way, we had to get the businesses involved. And obviously, as Ellen said, employees are a huge part of business, and the way we can drive the change really comes from the heart of that. So nature, again, a stat I'm sure most of you are familiar with, but in case you're not, it underpins about 50%, over 50% of our GDP and our economy are either moderately or highly dependent on nature, which means they rely on some sort of natural resources. If you go far enough back, everything relies on natural resources, the clean water, the clean air, everything that we rely on in society. But that just shows how much of our economy is really heavily reliant on nature as a fundamental part of their business. And I think what we've seen throughout the campaign is, whilst businesses are really on board with the climate crisis, and we're seeing a huge drive in net zero strategies and some of those really big impacts coming from that area, we needed nature to be part of these conversations too. So there's a lot of education that needs to happen, not just at senior levels, but across businesses, just to understand those links between the nature crisis and climate. They really do go hand in hand, and it's really important that we're not addressing one to the detriment of the other, and actually nature is our biggest ally in combating climate. So really this is about bringing it all together, and as Deborah Meaden's kind of quoted and spearheaded in our campaign, this is something that businesses just cannot afford to ignore anymore. We're already seeing disruption in supply chains, we're seeing flooding across our fields in the UK. You know, we're really starting to see the effects of this now. So if we go to the next slide, what we really wanted to do was empower the employees. So this is about getting anyone in whatever workforce, in whatever job, to start engaging with the nature and climate crisis in a real collective way. So looking at how they can start shifting the system rather than the individual actions, which absolutely have their place, but there's lots of other resources that people can go and find out about those individual actions. So again, using some of the stats that we collected as part of this, we had that 77% of employees are worried about the state of nature in the UK, and that's a huge number. And it actually rises as you get into the more senior roles as well. So, you know, once you get into 45 plus age range, you're starting to see more concern around this. And I think that really starts to show that there really is an impetus for businesses to start engaging with the nature crisis. We also found that 9 out of 10 employees agreed that employees should consider the impact of business, the impact that business has on nature when making decisions. So again, hopefully this is really showing that if you can do it, then your employees are on board, and you can really start to build up that momentum, and people will understand why you're making shifts in the way you do things. And really, we just wanted to show that internal systems change can happen. You know, this is about shifting from the bottom and the top up. It can start small, but really being part of the journey, building a team around you, finding your cohort of nature lovers in your workplace really can make a difference. So if we go on to the next slide, looking at who can use this, as I guess both me and Ellen have said, this is really about looking for everyone. And it's around finding the right people to help you. So this isn't something we expect anyone to be a technical expertise on, or have the individual have to do this alone in any way. This is around getting started, finding the people in your workforce that can help you. And we've had a case study already come through where one woman started this conversation, and suddenly I think she had 20 people step forward to be immediately part of the conversation, because they realized that they also wanted to be part of it, and they had a love, and they just didn't know how to place it. So it doesn't matter whether you're in a sustainability team, whether you're already a green champion. This is about getting started and helping you reach out to maybe the teams that do already exist, and helping you get involved and recognizing how everyone's role can have an impact on nature. And obviously, as with Business Declares, we know that collaboration and getting more people involved is really important in this space, but the more people that we can get involved, the larger impact we're going to have across it. So on the next slide, what we've, just to get into a bit of the detail of the guide that we've created, obviously go online and have a look at it in detail. But what we found is that it's really hard to know where to start. And obviously coming up with a whole business strategy to shift your whole company just feels quite daunting as an individual employee. So what we've tried to do is break it down into 5 areas, which as an employee, you could pick the one that feels most relevant to you, pick the one that you feel empowered or have the most influence over in terms of your expertise or your passion. So this is where we've got our 5 ways in, and you can see them quickly on the slide here, but in the toolkit, it breaks it down into questions for each one of them and how you can dig into more detail. So 5 ways we've identified are through your supply chain. So looking at how you can change what you buy and sell and set criteria to procurement, or how you start talking to your suppliers about nature. Then you've got finances, and that's things like where do you invest, how are your pensions used, and how can you start to use your buying power for nature positive decisions. We then go on to workforce, so that's looking at how we engage people. So this can be as simple as taking meetings outside and starting to really connect with nature, but also looking at how you can build people's knowledge and journey on this space. So are there videos that you can show? You could use the films that Ellen talked about earlier, and just start to build up that knowledge base across the organization and that interest and passion as well. We know that most people really relate to nature because it's quite tangible and they can see it. And you know, who doesn't love hearing a robin sing in the morning? Then we move on to policies. So that's looking at how we can set policies within the workspace. So whether that's targets or changing key performance indicators to help you build nature into your decision making. And then finally onto workplace, which is how we can bring nature into the on the ground activity. So whatever land or area you have influence over, whether you have an office block, whether you're out in a factory, whatever you can get on board with, there's probably something you can do. And that could be as simple as putting a wildflower verge along your car park, could be putting bird boxes up on your walls, but there's also some real detailed ones about how you can look at the energy you use and kind of digging into them. So in each of those 5 ways, we've tried to dig into the criteria and start setting those questions that anyone can use to start the conversation. And then on the next slide, just to finish off, we've got a lot of 5s going on in this project, but we've brought it into 5 steps. So the first one is really about that finding out more piece, and there's lots of information about the risks to businesses, the opportunities, and where you can go dig into it and start understanding what your business's impact on nature is. The second step is, as I just talked about, kind of finding out what the right questions are and where you can get started. The third step is collaborating with colleagues. So how can you go reach out to teams, reach out to your manager and get people around you? And in the guide, we've got various templates for emails that you can use. We've got PowerPoints to get you started. So it's not something that you have to go and build totally yourself. You can just take the PowerPoint we've created and get started. Then step 4 is holding the conversation. And that's got a really easy to follow conversation guide, some suggested timings and how you break it down. And then the 5th step is turning that talk into action. And that's looking at how, when you've held the conversation, you might have some ideas or you might have some suggestions of where you can go find solutions and how you can turn that into action after that. So hopefully feels quite manageable, and we can start, you know, there's no set time frame on this. This is very accessible, very adaptable for anyone to make a start. And then on the last slide, there's just a really nice quote from our collective CEOs. So that's RSPB, National Trust and WWF. And I'm going to leave it on the screen, but I just think that first bit is really empowering in terms of if we can inspire the 30 million people at work in the UK to think about nature in their day-to-day decisions, just think how powerful that could be to bring real change to our natural environment. And I think that's what we're really trying to achieve here. So thank you all for joining. It's really great to have you here. As Ellen said, this is a movement that will only build with people getting involved. So feel free to share it, let us know, reach out to us. We're more than happy to answer questions and come do these chats to lots more people. So please just let us know how we can help. I think we're now going to watch a video of Deborah Meaden, who's kind of spearheading the campaign.
Brilliant. Yeah, just a really short video.
Would you like to bring your love of nature to your work? For those of us whose jobs don't have direct contact with the natural world, that might sound a little challenging. The UK is one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world, and you might not realise it, but the decisions we all make at work each day can make a huge difference. That's why the National Trust, the RSPB and WWF have come together to create Nature's Workforce, a way for all of us to take action at work to help restore our natural world and make our workplaces more resilient. Nature's Workforce helps you understand the link between your business and nature, ask the right questions, and collaborate with your colleagues to make a plan of action. Join the movement of people across the UK who are helping make their workplaces more nature-friendly. You can start that conversation today. Go to naturesworkforce.org.uk to learn more.
Wonderful. Well, that video is, obviously something that you can use if you're choosing to use this toolkit within your environment, your community. And if we go on to the next slide in a moment, it'll be wonderful if we can hear from ALISON. ALISON FORTESCUE, who's here with us, is the Director of Compliance and ESG in the FT, and obviously they're a member of Business Declares. So I'm really just going to hand over to you, ALISON. I know you were involved in the early research, and obviously no one started using it yet, but it would be great to get your thoughts and your views. So over to you.
Thanks, Fiona, and thank you very much for inviting me along today. So I'm my role here at the FT is Director of Compliance, but I'm very involved in various aspects of FT sustainability work, mainly because it's an area I've always been very passionate about. So I sort of put my hand up for everything everything that we're working on in this space. So Ellen and Kim have given a really good sense of why nature and biodiversity are so important and why this is urgent and how the toolkit can help. I'm really just going to talk through a few observations and examples from my perspective from within a business. Before doing so, I thought it'd be helpful just to give a bit of context as to where we are on our journey at the FT. We have committed to reducing our emissions as a business, our carbon emissions, to advancing sustainable behaviours in the workplace, and also obviously providing good information on sustainability issues to our readers. We do have validated SBTI targets for 2030 and 2050. And so there is a bit of a focus for us at the moment around the emissions work at the corporate level. Recognising, though, the importance of nature and biodiversity, our employee group on sustainability is very active in this area. And it's really with that hat on that I'm here today. So if we could move forward to the next slide, please. And the next one. Thank you. So why is this important? Why do we need to act? Over and above the reasons that have already been provided, which are pretty compelling. And it is just sort of the right thing to do. There are some reasons that I felt within the FT it's very important to us to take this forward. So firstly, around our employees. Our current and prospective employees really do care about nature, we find. We see this in the questions that were asked during recruitment. We see it in the engagement with our sustainability activities that we're working on, and questions that get raised and things we get challenged on as a business, and whether we're moving fast enough. We see that people really care about this. Our employees want to know that we're acting and how they can get involved, which is great. And generally, our employees who care about this, and most of them do, knowing that your organisation is taking action is a motivating factor. And it can also help with, I think, with acquiring and retaining employees as well. It's also an area that it's important for employees' well-being. Mental health is an important issue of our time, and there's a big synergy between nature and mental health. So we have a mental health employee group and a sustainability employee group, and we're increasingly will be working together. And I know the WWF and Mental Health Foundation recently put a great guide out on this, which is worth having a look at. Secondly, in our supply chain, the sort of other end of the spectrum, we're seeing an increase. recently over the recent years, obviously with companies with their carbon commitments, means that we see a lot of increase, I'm sure you also do, in the questions that you get asked as a supplier, sometimes some really full-on questionnaires. We as a company are also asking more questions of our suppliers ourselves within our supply chain. The approach often with this is to start asking questions to enable to be able to report, but gradually over time to tighten up on that and make sustainability, carbon, nature, etc., a factor in decision making. So only accepting suppliers who are meeting your expectations in these areas. Whilst I think that's really ingrained now for carbon, we are starting to see it much more for nature, biodiversity, etc. So I feel that commercially it's likely to become increasingly important to have a story to tell about what your business is doing in this space. And the forthcoming reporting requirements, particularly across Europe and US, are only going to increase that. So I feel there's a commercial drive to this as well. And I'd also see nature as a business risk, but also as a business opportunity. This depends obviously on the area of your business, with some more obvious than others, but it does affect everybody, and a very important area to be considering. We're working on our TCFD reporting at the moment, and nature is coming through in that, the risks around sort of supply chain disruption, particularly our sort of print business and events business as well. More generally, I feel the impact that business can have shouldn't be underestimated. We're seeing this on carbon, and I think it's great that we'll be catching up on that on nature as well. So on to the next slide, please, and then one forward again as well. Thank you. So how can the toolkit help? I know it's only just been released, but I was lucky enough, as has been mentioned, to be involved with the research, which was really interesting to go through. So as part of that research, I had conversations internally to test out an earlier version of the toolkit. I'm keen, as part of the employee group, to agree how we can use the toolkit within the FT, and hopefully by the meeting that Business Declares are organising on July the 4th, we will have some more examples to talk about. But so far, we've already got a few sort of thoughts around this, and what I've found is, firstly, that the toolkit provides a really good framework which can help enormously with the confidence to get started with those conversations. Sometimes I think no matter how keen you are, it can be hard to know how to get started. And if you're like me, that makes it really easy to put it off. So I personally found the framework, the structure and the timing around what it said about the conversations that you can have was really helpful as a starting point. I'd certainly adapt that as we go forward, and depending on the audience and sort of what's going on within the FT, but it gave me the confidence to have those first discussions and just to get started. It also provided a framework to help identify what you're already doing within your business, where the gaps are and how to prioritise them. I also found that particularly useful as and reassuring, actually, because I realised we're doing a lot more than maybe I thought we were. It was just all a bit fragmented, and it was really good to sort of pull that together. So much of what the employee group relates to nature. Yeah. And on my slides, I found photos. I've added photos. So, for example, our US office has got bees on the roof. In London, we're trying, slightly less excitingly, but herbs on our roof. We've had vegan awareness talk during Veganuary. We do beach and park cleans and planting flowers. And the picture there on this slide is a terrarium exercise that we did, which in conjunction with our mental health group, actually, and my colleagues' terrarium, which I find very difficult to say, is thriving, apparently, a year later. So I think on that basis, nature is an easier area for employees to take action on and to get behind than perhaps the emission targets, which feel a bit drier and more sort of corporate. I think nature's a great area for employees to join in with. I've also found that in these conversations, it's not just about raising awareness or me raising awareness. It's also finding out what other employees are already doing, whether that's within the FT or whether it's in their private life. That enables us to bring together people who have expertise and like-minded people, which is really powerful. For example, in the first conversation I had using the toolkit, I learned that one of my colleagues, who's based in Manila at the moment, is doing some amazing work in conservation in his free time, which was, I didn't know that before. and other colleagues who are passionate about composting and willing to sort of do webinars to encourage other employees to take that up. It was really quite empowering to find this out. And that was just through, you know, the couple of conversations, formal conversations I had. I think also we can use the toolkit to build diversity, biodiversity and nature into our day-to-day roles, to keeping it front of mind, whatever role you have. So, for example, for me, I'm very involved at the moment in a project to update our procurement platform. And thinking about nature, it's a really good opportunity to build questions into our supply chain due diligence, and also to build commitments into our supplier code of conduct. So it's sort of using the toolkit to keep this in my mind and build that into other things that I'm doing in my role, and same for other people. And then my last point there is about building up a network of people who are also on this journey. Since I've sort of been getting involved in sustainability, I've been consistently advised to just make a start. And that's great advice, but it's also a little bit scary for somebody who prefers to feel like you're an expert before you start. And I'm very long way from that. I'd sort of worried that there were so many mistakes I could make, that it's wasted or missed opportunities, I could waste time, money, etc. Having contacts in other organisations and in your own organisation who are also on this journey is really important to share ideas, problems, inspiration. Business Declares is obviously a great forum for that. And the conversations on the 4th of July and knowing who else is using this toolkit and how they're finding it, what they're learning from it, I think is incredibly important and powerful. So next slide, please. And so, yeah, just to close for me, I think many of us have felt a sense of frustration for a while, knowing that we want and need to do something about nature and the environment more generally, but not sure what to do or how. And I feel this toolkit helps answer that, and enables us all as employees, wherever we're working and whatever role we're in, to take action and make a difference. And that's pretty inspiring. And so just to repeat the advice that I've already just mentioned is just, you know, do start, don't wait. No one has all the answers. And by starting that conversation and bringing on others along on that journey, then you can really make a difference. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Alison. I've loved your examples and the things you found out from colleagues, and that idea of just getting on with it. And I agree, having seen the toolkit, it's a great start, great help, isn't it? A great framework. So some brilliant examples there. I just want to hand over to Kelly because Kelly and I are going to run the 4th of July event, not the election, obviously, but the we'd already picked that date. Over to you, Kelly.
That's great. Hi everyone, I'm Kelly. I'm supporting Fiona from the Business Declares side, and yeah, really grateful from Kim, Ellen and Alison to help us get started with that nature conversation. And at Business Declares, we want to support that conversation going forward. So on 4th of July at lunchtime, we'd love for businesses who want to use this toolkit and want to discuss with peers, with other businesses using the toolkit, and we're going to support a sort of action learning session. So please do sign up. There'll be a link sent out in the follow-up notes, and it would be great to just share some of those experiences and how people are using it and any challenges and suggestions. So yeah, I think that's it for me. Hope to see you there. And I think now we're going to open up to Q&A. So if there's any questions in the chat, or you are welcome to come off of mute to ask your question. Thank you.
I know that I was just wondering if Sam Baker, you had a question about risk, didn't you? Do you want to?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so I suppose there's you know, because you mentioned risk, I think that was you, Kim, at the beginning. Alison, you mentioned risk. And obviously, yeah, if you stand back from it, clearly, if you can't get fresh water, you know, or drinkable water, et cetera, it is a risk. But what are those sort of pointy things that feel that they're on the risk register for the next year or two?
Is that to me, Sam?
Yes, Alison, or anybody else, but yeah, definitely, Alison, I'd really like to hear you if you want a point of view on that. So,
Yeah, it's a very good question, because I mean, I'm not directly involved in our risk register. I'm involved with the TCFD report, but not the risk register itself. And I find it a little bit difficult sometimes to from a risk perspective, to differentiate between nature and sort of emissions of climate change more broadly. But I would see there's obviously the transition risks and the increasing legislation and reporting coming through. So the need from that, like I've talked about with the supply chain and sort of meeting those requirements ourselves, depending on your business, the sort of legal risk around that. And then the costs, I think, and the supply chain disruption that's likely to come through. So, you know, our suppliers are going to be needing to put their prices up if there are disruption around biodiversity where they're getting their supplies from, and also the increasing legislation that they're needing to meet. And then the obvious ones, like you've said, about the availability of water and for us sort of the paper side of our business, but also increasingly on the digital side. I mean, read a lot about the need for water for the data centers that we're all reliant on. So there's, you know, I think it just affects every business. When you dive 1 or 2 layers down, you can see how much it's going to affect. And then also just not just at all, but the employee side of it. So the direct impact on employees through this and through climate change is clear. We've got a big office in Manila, and we see disruption already for them. And they're sort of maybe slightly more hidden and harder to sort of quantify impact on employee mental health through the destruction of nature and wildlife, I think is very important as well. So yeah, not directly my space, but those are my sort of immediate thoughts.
I was just going to agree with all of them and just add one more to the risk that we talk about when we talk about business risk, and that comes down to your reputation and retention risks as well. You know, we are seeing, you know, particularly the younger employees are really engaged with the nature and climate crisis. You know, there's a lot of eco anxiety coming up through the ranks, and we're seeing you know, direct calls for action. And people are, I think there was a Deloitte study, which I can find a link to, but I'm not going to try remember the stats, but they had amazing stats around the amount of people that considered leaving jobs or choosing their employees based on environmental credentials, and whether they would stay in that company long term depended on how much they were going to do in that space. That's the only one I would add on top of what Alison has already said, because the cost and the supply chains, we are seeing those effects already right now.
Brilliant. Is there any other questions that we have? I'm just thinking, I know Ben put something into the chat, but just
Samantha Cooper here. Can I just chip in, Fiona?
You want to get yours in first? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, I just thought I might build on Alison and Kim's great comments and just sort of add another on top of reputational risk, but actually sort of the legislatory risk we see coming through too as well, for perhaps for whether that is greenwashing or eco-side. So I think that's just another area that businesses need to really be thinking about on the risk side. We're doing quite a lot of work on this. Suzanne Wise and Sam Baker also leading on it to look at some test cases where businesses we think are going to be held accountable for their actions. So I just wanted to put that in before passing on to other questions.
Yeah, really important. Yeah, and another area that we're working on in Business Declares as a theme around legislation. So Ben, do you want to ask your question that you put in the chat about monetizing nature?
Yeah, so I'm seeing at the sustainability conferences a lot of talk around monetizing nature. You know, is a bee worth 2 pandas or 2 pandas worth 1 bee? And this awful kind of reductionist philosophy that's being placed on nature. And personally, I find it hugely distasteful. But I'm just wondering, well, is it a kind of means to an end? Because business will kind of sit up if they can sort of monetize. And that tree that was chopped down on Hadrian's Walls, I can't remember what the price was. Was it 6 million or 60,000 quid, something or other? Someone somewhere had monetized that tree, and I was thinking, how have they done that? What do people think as kind of anyone really, I'm just curious of views. Guess go to the speakers primarily first.
I'm happy to start, but also that's a very big question for 2 minutes, Ben. That's I think it has its place, and I think, you know, in terms of how we value nature, there are so many intrinsic values that are priceless, and we need to be really careful of how we do manage it. And it kind of comes down to all the natural capital discussions that are floating around like crazy at the moment. But I also think if it, like you said, if it is a means to the end and it just gets people recognizing that there has been a lot of free resources we've been taken from nature that we don't account for, and if they were to just disappear, our costs would be hugely greater in everything that we do. I think it does help put it on the balance books in a way that is useful. But I think taking it as read when you say that a tree is worth 6 million, that's when it gets problematic, because you're not, you know, if it becomes a black and white, this is worth this and this is worth that, I think that's where it gets problematic. Whereas if it's just a way to capture information, then it has its place and it's really useful. But it's such an interesting topic that I think I could probably talk about it for the next week if you wanted to. And I think there's so many opinions out there that you do just, it's just going to be really complicated. And I think I do worry, like you said, that it just becomes an accountancy tool. But I think there is space for it if we get it right and take it carefully.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to very briefly agree with what Kim's just said. And as you said, it's a huge philosophical question, isn't it, in some ways? And it's kind of an ideological one that I think will there'll be different businesses on different parts of the spectrum. Some who are seeing that kind of unitization as a way into a conversation, and then all the way to the more kind of radical businesses that are looking at using the fewest amount of natural materials and are really kind of anti-growth almost in their perspective. So I think I'm coming at this from more a broader engagement perspective and kind of narratives, but I think anything that you can do to bring more businesses at different levels of their journey into this conversation is a positive, with a long-term view to kind of educating against that very kind of imperialist kind of limiting view of nature as something you can monetize. But that's all we probably fit in a minute.
I think that is unfortunately 2 o'clock on our time. So it's been a really, really valuable conversation. Thanks to Sam Baker for setting up these events, and for Alison to coming, and Kim and Ellen, as well as the whole team, Kelly and Vaishnavi. We really love you to come along to, even if you haven't done very much with it, but if you want to find out more what other people are doing on the 4th of July as a follow-up, and to really share this with everyone that you know in larger companies as well, where there are lots of employees, that would be really fantastic. And sorry we didn't get to answer all the questions, but we will be doing a lot more on nature coming up. And there's also on the 27th of June, we'll be working with Kingsdale Head, who are a member, and looking at what they are doing around peat restoration. So watch this space. Thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
all.
all.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.